Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with another deck creation video, this one with Jenny Flint and Madame Vastra. This deck creation request comes from Lexa, who says, I've been trying to make the Jenny Flint Madame Vastra partner pair from the Doctor Who decks work because I love the characters, but I haven't been able to crack the code and would love some advice and direction on what to do with them. They seem interesting or simple on paper, but my gut says there might be something interesting underneath, but I may be wrong. Now they said about a budget of $1 per card, and Lex also said that they're down to Proxy about 10 cards. What I did is I made the deck completely under the budget, and then after we look at the deck, we'll be looking at those 10 additional cards to see what we can pull out and what we can add in for power. This deck was a lot of fun to make. I really like this partner pair. I find partners that specifically partner with another creature to be very underused, design space in Magic. I really like them, so I find this combination very strong and very fun to play. So let's get right into it. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So who are Jenny Flint and Madame Vastra, and what are they doing for the deck that we've built? Well, they're a very fun combination of creatures that support each other very well, both of them being very combat oriented. Jenny Flint, our first one, at least alphabetically, and actually also by mana cost, so often our first one. Jenny Flint is 3 mana in Izzet colors, that's blue and red, legendary human detective. Kind of early for the detective trend, but I'm glad she made it. They partner together. She has first strike training, which means whenever a creature that is stronger than this creature attacks, this creature gets a +1/+1 counter. And she says whenever you sacrifice a clue or food, you put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. Then Madame Vastra says, obviously the partner text, must be blocked if able, and whenever a creature dealt damage by Madame Vastra this turn dies, create a clue token and a food token. So, the combination of these two creatures is pretty straightforward. We have basically a combat pairing. Technically, Jenny does not need to be attacking in order to kind of get the combo going, but as a first strike training creature that grows very, very quickly, I think we do want to attack with her. Likewise, Madame Vastra also wants to be attacking all the time and will get very much so stronger as the deck goes as the game goes on, because Jenny will be putting the counters onto Madame Vastra. That's the cycle, right? Vastra attacks, often will have to kill something because she's too big and your opponents have to block. That will create the food and clue token, which are then sacrificed in order to grow Vastra, and every time she attacks with Jenny Flint grows. So you kind of have this tag team of combat-based commanders, and I really, really like that. And so kind of the direction I went in building this deck is generally leaning towards kind of 3 main pillars. The first pillar is just using our commanders as intended, specifically more often Madame Vastra, taking advantage of her token generation and her power to kind of knock your opponent off their feet by attacking over and over again. Then the second place I worked on was very specifically with our investigate plan. So using cards like Reckless Fireweaver and Seraph Steelseeker, and we'll go through the whole deck in a moment, but cards that specifically work with the clue angle to kind of take advantage of the clue and food that will be generated for other means. And the final part of the deck was just alternative win conditions, cards that benefited from this kind of combat loop and the growing of our creatures in order to have backup win conditions outside of our commander, or alternative ways to kind of defeat our opponents through combat damage. The power level of this deck was kind of stated to be kind of mid to low, depending, kind of something I would think of an advancement off of a precon is where the power level I was seeing. So our win conditions are going to be combat, and they're going to be based on not specifically combinations of cards. That being said, there is a combo factor to this deck, and there are cards for sure in my 10 proxy list that will get us into either infinite combos or winning up against decks that have much higher, what I would call higher power. So this deck will be able to hold its own. So let's go through our cards and see what I added. Now, I don't know if I directly mentioned it, the budget was about $1 a card. So you'll find, now these cards will give the Card Kingdom list, which is higher than the TCG player list. And I was using the TCG player list, but I try to average it out. I'm never one to find that like every card has to be under $1, but if you have enough cards at like 20 cents, you have room for a card that's $2, if that makes sense. If that's breaking the rule, those are the cards that can come out to put in the proxy cards, because I don't think there's that many to begin with. So let's start off. The first thing I wanted to do is a nice collection of mana dorks at 1 mana. Now you'll notice that I'm kind of low on ramp outside of these 4. I have Rampant Growth at 2, and I believe I've Arcane Signet, and that's about it. The reason is if you look at our curve is very, very low. We're very much so, I try to put in as many 1 mana cards and 2 mana cards into this. Our commanders are at 3 and 4, specifically 4 being our strongest one, so it's lower, and then we kind of trail off to a few cards. The reason I wanted to keep our curve low is that we needed spare mana to be cracking clues and eating food, right? And we want to take advantage of that, especially we want to be able to be pushing our plan forward and still having 1 or 2 mana left over turn after turn in order to crack an extra clue and just get ahead on cards. With that in mind, I have a few other ways to make mana in the deck, but generally I wanted to hit 3 as fast as possible. 3 being the cost to get Jenny Flint out and start attacking, 4 obviously being the next call. If we get our 1 mana out, 4 is going to be on the 3rd turn. And I like that very strong start. The quicker we start attacking, the happier we're going to be. The other thing is we have equipment and we have +1/+1 counters. So I do like our ramp being creatures, which means we can later revisit these creatures, make them stronger, and make them into attackers. I also especially like Gilded Goose, who just barely makes it under budget if we account for other cards, because that flying is kind of relevant if we start pumping the goose or we start equipping to it. So that was our main idea there. After which, we start going into our utility creatures and our stronger creatures. Wildwood Scourge is a card that I love in +1/+1 counter decks. And though we aren't very much so, we're not what I would consider to be like deep in +1/+1 counters, we have enough ways that Wildwood Scourge just kind of grows by itself slowly. And one of the things that I didn't touch on when I was talking about Madame Vastra, her ability to force blocks kind of guarantees that everything else tends to go through if it's all going at one opponent. And so cards like Wildwood Scourge not having trample isn't that big of a deal, because we're just going to be growing the Scourge and they're going to either be forced to block it or we're going to get the damage through. So I like this as like an early play, but later in the game we can dump a bunch of mana into this creature and just have it as like coming out as a threat. I don't know, I'm clicking out, we can go back. Daring Sleuth is one that I really do like. Comes in as a 2/1. Once we crack our first clue, we get a prowess creature that when it deals combat damage to a player, investigate. This is the same kind of idea as before, where we're kind of leaning on the fact that our commanders will force blocks and we can get this creature out easier. Though we're not like a prowess deck and we're very much so in creatures, we have very good instant sorceries and artifacts that we can play preemptively to grow the Daring Sleuth, which is, what is this on the other side? The Bearer of Overwhelming Truth. That's such a good name. To grow this creature enough that if it can't get in, at least it's forcing some good blocks. After which we have the Erdwall Illuminator. I would say this is one of the cards I find to be weaker in the deck. It does have evasion, something I really do like, and it does have this kind of investigate combo that whenever you investigate, you get another clue. However, our main way of making clues through our commanders is not investigating, and therefore that won't be doubled. So it's an interesting card that works with parts of our deck, but in the long run, one that I don't love, but I do like it in here for the utility to flying. I think it's a decent creature. It'd probably be one I'd cut for the proxy cards. Reckless Fireweaver, very straightforwardly, is a card that as artifacts enter the battlefield, we deal 1 damage to each opponent. This is a really good card that we can get out early and represents, you know, with Madame Vastra, 2 damage every trigger. Not even including all of the other ways we have to create tokens or clues or artifacts, this card will do a lot of work. It's also a pretty good blocker and can kind of hang out back, you know, just chilling. But if you put a few counters on it, it gets into a very combat capable, let's say, creature with the higher toughness. Saren's Steelseeker is pretty much the same thing in a lot of ways, except for the only difference is we're digging through the top of our deck instead of grinding, dealing damage, sorry. With 38 lands, I feel like this card will probably get a lot of our lands off the top, which I'm pretty happy with, or get rid of cards we don't want. So a nice utility card. Thormingbird, following the kind of using utility creature with flying theme we're having here. This one has Proliferate. I feel like we have enough +1/+1 counter synergy that I do like using this. And I think once we get a counter on both of our commanders, Thormingbird being able to pump both our commanders on every attack is more than enough for me to think it is a worthwhile creature here. Coming to something a bit stronger, Elmar, Uvenwald Informant, is a different partner creature, a Friends Forever creature, that mainly is just another way to investigate. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, untap target creature, then investigate. Now that can be used as a combat trick when your opponents attack you, especially with Madame Vastra becoming very, very strong and very large and hard to defeat. But generally, I think you're happy with this creature being kind of a value creature. Once again, with the haste, we have the ability to just attack in. We're taking blockers out anyways. Getting the hit in is very easy, but 3/3 with haste is just very much so at the right level to get that first training counter onto Jenny Flint, and I do very much so like that. After which, we have Ewit, never a card I'm too happy to miss out on. Ingenious Artillerist is kind of a mix of Sarenth Steelseeker and Reckless Fireweaver in the sense that it's triggered off artifacts, but I guess the only thing it has in common with the Fireweaver is that it's red, but still, we're going to use this to dig through our deck, find the answers that we want, and make sure our hand is kind of sculpted. Ah, so many words. Kami of Whispered Hope is another +1/+1 counter kind of payoff, except for this one doubles our +1/+1 counters, works very well with our commanders, and generates mana. This is something, especially if Madame Vastra gets knocked out of the game, or is hard to bring back, we can kind of use the held up clues to start putting counters onto the Kami of the Whispered Hopes. Like you go to the end of your turn, or your last opponent's turn, you crack some clues, and through Jenny Flint, you start putting those counters onto Kami of Whispered Hopes. After you do that, you can then tap the Kami to crack even more clues or cast bigger cards. I think that combination is very, very strong, and I do particularly like the plan of having backup plans to gain the mana that we need to power out our commanders again. Speaking of which, Rishkar Pima Renegade works almost the same way. I do like the fact that it puts those first 2 +1/+1 counters, but allowing our creatures to start tapping for mana when they have the counters, especially our commanders, because there's going to be some situations where combat is a bit tough and we want to power out a different spell, is really, really nice. I think just generally, this is just a decent card, and if you think about this as kind of like, how would I put this? Kind of like a Kodama's Reach or Cultivate, where we're going to put a counter for 3 mana, we're turning 2 creatures into mana dorks. So much like Cultivate, we're getting 2 lands. This is making 2 creatures into mana. It's not the same thing, but I do like that it's a creature. It works well with the rest of our suite, and I think it's a pretty good time. I don't know why I keep clicking out of it. I think I'm so used to it. Duggan Private Detective is the first of our alternative win cons. I do like this is a Doctor Who card. Very straightforwardly, power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand, and whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, investigate, making him a Titan of sorts. And then once it can deal double damage of double its power onto another target creature, only once. I'm assuming this is something that happens in the show. Obviously, with a name like the most important punch in history, fantastic. I think this is a very solid backup, creature, it works really, really well with Jenny Flint as kind of like an alternative Madame Vastra. They're all even the same mana cost, and I do really, really like that. And I think this one, like, this one is he's a little harder to grow because we have to keep the cards in our hand, but I think we can safely, with all the investigation that'll be going on as the detective, it will be easy to keep them around 4 or 5 power, ideally, and I think that's a good number. Get a few training triggers off of Jenny, and otherwise just build becoming a threat. That most important punch in history can be very, very powerful, and I'm pretty sure you just have to keep track of the fact that it's happened once. Granted, I think if you blink or return Dug into the battlefield, that, it doesn't say once per game, so I'm pretty sure it just, by this creature, it's like once per this card. I did it again. Ethereal Investigator, once again, a very nice investigation payoff and enabler. ETB getting 3 clue tokens, and then every time you crack a clue token on your turn, presumably, you'll get a white spirit. Pretty good. This one is one of the cards that I really do like also just by having flying stapled to it. With that first +1/+1 counter onto this creature, it gets big enough that it can start training Jenny Flint. But otherwise, I think this is just a solid creature that your opponents kind of have to deal with, because otherwise the card advantage and the engine starts working, and so you're getting tokens, and those tokens are creating spirits, and those spirits are, I guess the spirits are tokens too, so your tokens are creating tokens, and you're very quickly going to get control of the board and in numbers, which pairs really well, if you ask me, with our main kind of go tall plan between our 2 commanders. So, though this is a card that I think sometimes can be clunky, I really like it here. Next we have Nath of the Dire Hunt, and I really, really like this card here. So this card works exceedingly well with Madame Vastra. It says whenever your creatures fight or become blocked, you draw a card. Considering that your commander forces blocks, this guarantees our card draw every single time. But what I really, really like about this is at the beginning of combat, you may pay 2 red or a green hybrid. If you do, double target creature's power until end of turn. That creature must be blocked this combat if able. Now, at first this feels kind of like not the strongest thing to do because we already have Madame Vastra and there's already kind of a limit to this power, but I actually don't think I think that's looking at the wrong way. We want to use this on Jenny Flint. First of all, she has First Strike, which makes the doubling just of the power very, very strong. And then when you have both your commanders out, you're getting the attack through. Both of them having to be blocked guarantees you A, drawing 2 cards off of Nath, but B, it also allows all of your other attackers on the ground to get through more likely. I don't think always guaranteed, but when you're taking 2 blockers away from a player, that's pretty meaningful, especially considering if you've been doing it every few combats against them. So I really, really like this. I think it's very strong. I think also she works very well if you're not all in on this strategy, because you can just use the mana on other creatures and force them to be blocked. Now, you can only do this once per combat, so it's not ideal, but oh, hold on, one or more creatures. Okay, you're still only drawing 1 if both your commanders get blocked. I misread that, but I still think it's a very, very powerful ability. And as a 3/3, once again, she's kind of at that level to start training Jenny, though mind you, if you double Jenny's power, it's a lot harder to do so. Still, I think it's a very strong ability. Provisions Merchant. So this isn't from the newest set, but it's from the last newest set. When it enters the battlefield, you create a food, and whenever you attack, you may sacrifice a food. If you do, attacking creatures get +1/+1 and trample until end of turn. Now, what I really like about this is very straightforwardly, this gives +1/+1 and trample. That's really all I care about. The fact that we're sacrificing a food, putting another +1/+1 counter, all that extra stuff is kind of superfluous to me. I just like the trample and the +1/+1. The fact that it's over all of our creatures is really nice, so the training will still happen, but I think it's very obvious how good Madame Vastra is with trample, because as she grows and grows and grows and the forcing of blocks, trample becomes more and more useful. Because one of the biggest problems you might have is the fact that token enemy opponents will just block, throw a token in front of your creature every single time, whereas Provisions Merchant for kind of trample gets around that, and I think this does that in a very, very fun way, in a very strong way. It's making me think that maybe I should have included some lure cards. Lure cards are those cards that force all creatures to block a creature, so you could force every single creature your opponent has to block Madame Vastra. But I think most of the time that's not going to be good, and it's kind of win more. Okay, I stand by my decision. The third Doctor is another one of our alternate win conditions. Something I like is, once again, we're at the same thing. It's a Doctor Who card for 4 mana in Simic, so we're staying on theme and we're staying around the same numbers. The third Doctor is potentially a really good alternative commander for the deck, though I obviously like, oh no, because we lose red, sorry, that's on me. But subs in for the 2 commanders very, very well. As you create tokens, third Doctor gets stronger and stronger. On ETB, you create a token of your choice. This one includes a treasure token, and he naturally has trample. Overall, I think this is just a very, very strong card, and you're going to find a lot of situations that you're going to play this creature and your opponents are going to have to deal with him. To which I would say, especially with our other win conditions, I think I would hold them in hand as long as I can and wait until the first few board clears or removal spells, or when people are in a situation where they're kind of running out of resources, and then you can slam the third Doctor, with a bunch of the food tokens still up, and just start smashing turn after turn, and I think that's going to be very strong. Once again, works really, really well with Jenny, both in the creation and sacrifice of food tokens, but notably also because the third Doctor is large enough to be constantly training Jenny, which is something we really want. Now we're coming to the end where I would consider these creatures our finishers. Our finishers are Port Razor and Aki Battle Squad. Both of them do kind of the same thing, where we want them to be just attacking all out and creating multiple combats. This is kind of a spoiler to the cards I have to add that aren't budget, but taking extra combat steps is really, really strong here. You can see there's another one over here. Jenny Flint and Madame Vastra, when they attack turn after turn, because most of their triggers are combat triggers, and I'm sorry, I should say combat-oriented triggers, we get more and more benefits out of them with the additional clause that, with the forced blocks and the damage, we are getting to our win condition faster and faster. So not only do I really like Port Razor for the simple fact that with the block clause, it's a lot safer to throw out Port Razor into combat, because you can kind of work around players that have lower amounts of creatures. But Aki Battle Squad also is just very, very strong because your creatures are modified, both your commanders, allowing them to attack over and over again. I did miss one. Shimmer Dragon is the last one of our finishers. Obviously, this card is just very, very strong. If you ever played an artifact deck with Shimmer Dragon, especially a token one, you know how strong this is. It allows you to keep your clues around and instead just keep tapping them in order to draw cards as opposed to cracking them. And this card is very reasonably a 5/6 flying hexproof, which you're pretty happy with. Now that's almost 22 minutes, so I'll go a bit faster with the rest of the cards, but the rest of our cards are meant to support this kind of combat-based game plan. So Bushwhack, we're going to have a lot of fight and bites in this. So this is a fight with an extra ability. The fight and bites here are because Madame Vastra doesn't say it's combat damage, it's when a creature dealt damage by Madame Vastra this turn dies. So for us, using fights and bites is just really, really good, both because it pushes blockers away and allows us to kind of plan through combat better, but because we're just getting more and more triggers. If you think of every creature she kills as a delayed draw, it really shows how powerful she can be. So Bushwhack is a nice little fight. Many Partings is just a really nice way to get a food token and grab a forest out of our deck, which is it's an ability I tend to like at that mana cost, especially since our foods trigger other things, so it's a lot of value. Rampant Growth is ramp, Harmonize is draw. Last Night Together is just another take another turn, take another combat spell. Obviously this has to be on your second main, otherwise it doesn't do anything. I think if you cast it early, does there an additional combat phase twice in a row? No, because your creatures are tapped. Sorry. Obviously this is a very romantic card. It's about two characters having their last night together. I really don't know Doctor Who. But I will say, obviously, this works really, really well with our commanders, which we have 2 of them, and they fight well together. Now, I don't know if our characters are in a romantic situation, but I ship it, so they are to me. Blossoming Defense is a nice hexproof thing. We do want to protect our creatures, so there's going to be a few ways to do that. Tail Swipe is a bite, or a fight, sorry. They fight, yeah, so this is a nice 1-mana fight at instant. Withstand Death is another indestructible, another protection spell. Bite Down, obviously, is a bite. Cosmic Hunger with the giant jaws is another bite. Gaia's Gift is a really interesting card. +1/+1 counter, it gains Reach, Trample, Hexproof, and Indestructible. So I really like this as a defensive spell, but also a really strong, like, offensive spell with Madame Vastra because of that Trample. The reach is fine, the counter's fine. I just think sometimes having access to instant speed trample is going to be really, really good. Prize Fight, another fight that creates a token, very, very nice. Beast Within, we always want to be able to destroy permanents. And Colony Ambush, a fight that is also a land. Return of the Wildspeaker is our last instant card. This is just generically a very, very good card. I think we're leaning on draw cards equal to the greatest power of the non-human more than we are to the +3/+3. Obviously, with a lot of spirits outside of with the Investigate guy, we could use the second one, but knowing Madame Vastra could get very, very large, this could be a very good draw spell. Looking at our artifacts, we've got Barrow Blade, just a very nice thing that takes creatures' abilities away when they're blocked, and obviously we have the means to ensure that our creatures always getting blocked, right? So Barrow Blade works very well. Dire Blunderbuss is really, really good on both sides. Okay, so I have it on the wrong side. I must have put it in on this side accidentally. But Dire Flail, or maybe I looked myself earlier, but Dire Flail is just a +2/+0 1 equip. I like this. I think this is fine to just equip onto Jenny, but once we craft with Artifact, we get Dire Blunderbuss, and this is such a powerful card. Now we get the +3/+0. We don't really care about that. We want whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice another artifact, and then if you do, this creature deals damage equal to its power to a target creature. What does this do? We give this to Madame Vastra, we attack, we sacrifice a food, she deals her power to an opponent's creature, kills it, and then we get 2 more tokens. I really, really like this. Obviously, +3/+0 makes training a lot easier, but once again, we're sniping down creatures, we're taking out blockers, and we're generating more tokens. This is a very, very strong card. And obviously, the craft with Artifact is really, really easy, with our deck being generally just making artifacts all the time. Explorer's Scope is another equipment that I always like. Very easy to throw it on any creature here, start attacking, and start putting lands from the top of your deck onto the battlefield. I find the opportunity cost of this card is so low that you don't need to stack the top of your deck. Just every now and then you'll get to ramp a land, and you'll be very happy. Infiltration Lens is one I really like in this deck because once again we can force the block, and once we force the block we draw 2 cards. For 2 mana on the first time to draw 2 cards, it's great. If you get 2 blocked attacks with this, you're just rolling in cards. You'll be very, very happy. Soul Ring, very straightforward. Tarion Soul Cleaver, this is a card that comes and goes in prices. I've seen it very cheap. This is a bit more expensive than when I first put it in, so I don't know if it's going back and forth, but obviously I find this to be very, very good. If this was Shadow Spear, it would be a lot stronger, but unfortunately that's not in our budget, and I didn't even put it in our proxy cards. But the fact that these creatures get stronger and stronger as both your and your opponent's creatures and artifacts die, it's going to be very, very strong. So I think this is a very easy, it's not exactly Shadow Spear, but it feels very, very close, and I think it's going to do very well here. Arcane Signet for mana, Idol of Oblivion because we're constantly creating tokens, so a very, very good draw. Otherwise, we're probably never going to use this other thing. And even if our commanders aren't around, our chances of creating tokens is very, very high. So I do really like this spell here. And finally, I think this is the last equipment. I'm going to make sure. Loxodon, oh no, we got a few more. Loxodon Warhammer to give Trample and Lifelink. After which Nettle Cyst, once again growing for the number of artifacts we have, another very good equipment, and Swords of Vengeance, once again giving trample, haste, first strike, vigilance. Just to put on either of our commanders, all of this equipment is very, very good and turns our creatures into threats. Coming finally to our enchantments, we've got Rancor for trample that can return to our hand. We have Witness Protection for removal. Guild Artisan for, what is this? Creating 2 treasures by attacking your opponent with the highest life. I do really like this, and you have a lot of opportunities to do so, and especially you're very likely to have safe attacks, so I think it's pretty good to be able to use this in a very strong way. Heaven Sent, another Doctor Who card, 2 investigates, and then a very strong third ability that took me a while to figure out. Deals 1 damage to everything, and then it goes away and you may cast it the turn it goes to 3. Otherwise, if one of your opponents have been defeated, you draw 7. And it stops coming back. So this card I find to be strong. I think you have to kind of plan around it, but I think 3 mana every 3 turns, every 2 turns, 2, 3, yeah, every 2 turns you need 2 mana. And I think that's worth it. 2 mana for 2 investigates every 2 turns. I think you'll be pretty happy with that result. Am I doing it wrong? 1, 2, because the turn it comes down is the turn you cast it. Yeah, so it's every 2 turns. So this one, mainly because of the Doctor Who element to it, but I do think it's a very cool card. Ongoing Investigation, another Investigate card. This one's 1 or more creatures deal damage. This is a little trickier, but it gives us a lot of value in our flying creatures that can kind of poke in multiple opponents. And this Green Claws, I don't think it's that important, but it notably locks this ability from a lot of blue decks that would otherwise play it. So I think it's interesting. I don't think you'll ever cast it, but it's good that we're in green as well. Trail of Crumbs, very much so a food-based card. Whenever you sacrifice food, you can pay more mana to start digging through your deck. I think you're happy to do so. Killer's Service really caught my eye. ETB, 3 mana ETB, create 3 food, I think is enough by itself. But then saying at the beginning of your end step you may pay 2, sacrifice a token, and create a 4/4 warrior Rhino is also just very, very good. And with the extra ramp and the extra mana, you should be able to do this pretty regularly. So very interesting to me. I think we're generally going to be using it for the first half, but I like it as a payoff of like once a turn to create a 4/4. Master Chef obviously works really, really well. This creature enters the battlefield +1/+1 with an additional 1/1 counter, and other creatures enter with an additional 1/1 counter. And with 2 commanders, this gets even better. I didn't mention this for the Guild Artisan, but in the same ways that Master Chef works with 2 commanders, it works even better because this ability is mirrored on both commanders. Rising of the Day just gives us haste. Legendary creatures, you get +0/+1. +1/+0. We just want more haste in a deck like this, so that's what it's here for. Uvenwald Mysteries is whenever your creatures die, investigate. But more for that second ability, that whenever you sacrifice a clue, create a 1/1 human token. Just kind of the same way as the our other our Ethereal Investigator works. I wonder if why was this not into a Spirit Detective? That's a question. I didn't realize that. Maybe it should be errated. But both of these work the same way of allowing us to go wide as our deck is functioning. And finally, Knight of Sweet's Revenge is our last kind of mana ramp card. Both very, very good in the sense that it allows us to generate a food and turn all our food into mana, but it does also give us a win condition with 7 mana and a lot of tokens, which is something we can set up, especially when our commanders are off the table. So this is a nice backup win condition. Then the lands, I'm not going to go too much through them. Obviously, Keswick Wolf Run is a pretty notable one. Karn's Bastion can be particularly strong here. Where is Rogue's Passage as well? Once Madame Vastra gets strong enough and you actually don't want her to be blocked anymore, this is a good way of getting around her ability. I think those are the main utility lands here. Yeah, Desolate Lighthouse for getting cards, but otherwise very, very good. All right. With that in mind, according to this is about $72. Obviously, this is going to be a little different depending on if you can trade for the cards, where you live on the planet, And if you can order online or go to the LGS, as everyone says, go to your LGS, it's a lot better. Or trade with your friends. That's honestly my favorite way to get cards, is trading with friends. Because when I give someone a card, it's like I'm not selling it and getting rid of it. Someone else is going to enjoy it, and it's not going to just like rot in a shelf. Though I feel like some of the cards I get my friends stay in binders, so we'll see about that. Let's go into the final editions. These are the Proxy cards. Now, the main thing I want here in the first two cards is to kind of finish the extra turn combo. And what we have here is Aggravated Assault, which, once again, these are I try to keep the cards very, very cheap, but this is just $5 or over. Aggravated Assault is a card that allows you to just get more combats every single time if you have 5 mana. And then Bear Umbra is +2/+2 whenever this creature attacks, untap all lands you control. These two cards together are an infinite combat combo as long as your creatures are not dying, and Madame Vastra is a pretty big creature, so you should be fine. Not even noting the fact that, you know, even if you can't defeat all your opponents because one of your opponents has too large of a creature, you still can get a lot of value attacking around and knocking out like one opponent. That can let you put yourself in a position to get the other 2 opponents later. So that's the main combo I wanted to add. The other one here, once again, just a few bucks, but still, Relentless Assault is just another 4 mana, get another attack in, which I think is pretty worthwhile. After that, Academy Manufacturer is just very, very good here. Obviously, any deck with Clue, Food, or Treasure wants this card, so you are one of those decks, and you'll be very, very happy putting that in. After which, something I was thinking of is more indestructibility and more protection, and Mithril Coat feels like the right way to do this. I do like the fact that it is a combat trick in a way, and then after which you can move it around, and the fact that it itself is indestructible, making it really hard to get rid of. So this would be a nice addition. It's about $10. I don't love it too much, but I think it's good enough that it is worth considering as a proxy. After which, I think we're going into some of the more standard cards, just cards I wish we had access to. Birds of Paradise is just missing in this deck. I want a card that taps for all 3 colors and that it flies. For all of the reasons we talked about Mana Dorks before, and with all of the reasons we talked about flying before. Another one I'd like to put in here is Concordant Crossroads. That haste is really, really valuable, especially on our commanders. And though your opponent's tapping down their creatures kind of interferes with Madame Vastra's ability, still, I think you're going to be very happy with this card, especially when you drop your like much stronger creatures, such as like the 3rd Doctor. Having that haste is going to make a big difference, so I like having it out at 1 mana. Hardened Scales, I guess this is, wow, this is a lot cheaper than I remembered it. I kind of clicked it and I didn't even think about the price. Well, this used to be a very expensive card, but still, it is out of budget. Hardened Scales is just really nice in the sense that it's a very low mana card, opportunity cost is low, and just doubles the speed our commanders grow and increases the speed that the rest of our +1/+1 synergies work at. So with that in mind, I like this combination very well with our commander, and honestly, it's not that out of budget that you could still put it in the budget version. Then we're getting to kind of the boring cards. These are cards I just want to play because if we have a budget, it'd be nice to have them. Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study, sorry. They're both just good cards in blue that you never have a bad time playing, and there's a bit of budget associated to them, but having some more generic card draw would be nice in this deck, especially if we wanted to tango with higher power level card decks. And that's it. That was 10. All right. That's the deck. I hope you enjoyed it. Lexa, I hope you liked the deck. I think it's in a very, very kind of cool space with these commanders. I like that it's a budget deck. I honestly, if you asked me, I wouldn't be too interested in making a high power version of this. I think this is kind of a good power level for these commanders. I've said this before, but commanders sometimes just have kind of a ceiling on their power level. And I think that's fine. I think it's not too much of a problem to look at a commander and be like, they'll never be like a 9 out of 10, right? And Jenny Flint and Madame Vastra are strong commanders together, but because they interact mainly with combat in a format where like a lot of people pack board clears or really efficient removal, there will always be a ceiling on their power. However, when in mid power to slightly above mid power, they will excel and do really, really well. Plus, I think they're really fun. both with kind of the art choices, which I can actually show here, the art choices of having them, you know, back to back with their swords out is really, really cool. And the way that they've really found a way to get their abilities to complement each other very, very well. I wonder if these cards will ever be reprinted as Helena and Alana. Is that their names? I always mess up one of their names. Partners. Because they were originally printed as a green and a red partner. And I wonder if, you know, there would be another version, because it just really reminds me of them. Of being so close and fighting together and everyone shipping them together. Very, very cool cards. And so I really like this and I had a good time. Oh, Mines of Moria. I wanted to say somehow this is under budget. I remember people talking about this card being broken or too strong for Commander, and somehow it's just like under $1. Maybe I should have picked some up. I just did an order. Anyways, all that to say, thank you so much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me if you like the deck creation videos, or don't tell me anything and I'll continue to make them occasionally. The thing in the, I think at the start of the video it said deck text, but if you'd also want me to make one of your Commander decks, please send me an email. It is in the, I guess would it be in the video? No, it's in the about section of YouTube. I don't really know how it works, but if you want to have a, you know, a deck made for you, you want to talk with me and we can figure it out, please send me an email. I really like making decks, so I do enjoy it. All right, I hope this deck goes well and thank you for sending it my way. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there's a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you and good luck in brewing and building.